But now we go. Okay. We are in the second shir that we're doing in Siman Ayin Beis, the halachis of Erev Shabbos, basically, and we are up to Sif Ches. So we're still discussing about preparing for Shabbos, and the Kitzur says like this: Afilu anisha b'Yisrael, even if it's a person who does not have a lot of resources, Yizdares v'yisametz la'anegas es Shabbos, they still need to put in effort in order to be able to do something to push themselves a little bit in order to be able to have something more delightful on Shabbos. And one of the ways you do that is the whole week have less the whole week in order that you'll be able to have more on Shabbos. And they say the joke about the guy that he came to America and he's a big billionaire. So someone asked him how to do the whole thing. So he says, very simple. I came off the boat, I didn't have anything, and a guy offered me an apple. He saw I was hungry. So I took the apple and I polished the apple and I made it so nice and beautiful. And then I sold it for 2 pennies and I was able to buy 2 apples. And then with those 2 apples, I polished it, I made them nice, and I was able to sell those for 2 each, and I was able to buy 4 apples. And I kept on doing that until I was able to get a cart. And then eventually I was able to get, besides from my own cart, I was able to hire someone else to run a separate cart. And then eventually I had a whole bunch of carts all around, and I was doing really well. And then my great uncle died and left me a few $1 million. So sometimes economizing, meaning making sure that you're saving and being sort of penny pinching the rest of the week, could help you for Shabbos. Maybe not to be a billionaire, but at least you'll be able to cover your expenses. So that's one way to do it. Now, and you do this, Shabbos, you should have money in order to be able to honor Shabbos to get something a little bit more. Now, what happens? What happens if a person does not have money? So what are you going to do now? You can't spend less of what you don't have. So then the halacha is yilveh, you should borrow. And over here they put it they write it, but I'm putting it in parentheses because the Alter Rebbe doesn't say this. So we'll skip the next 2 words. Yilveh mashkoinois letzarchei Shabbos. If you have other things in your house, you have utensils, you have things like that, use them as a mashkin to borrow money for Shabbos. And I'll explain what that means in a second. And this our Chachamim tell us, Banai, that Hashem says, Banai, Hashem tells the Yidden, my children, Levu alai, borrow for me or on my cheshbon, va'ani poireya, and I will pay you back. Meaning, so the Kitzur explains that the chom is a neisav. This is also from the Gemara, I believe. The chom is a neisav shel adam ksuvim le'Rosh Hashanah. A person's entire sustenance for the year is set on Rosh Hashanah. How much they're going to make, etc. Chutz, besides meitzei Shabbos Yom Tov, besides what you spend on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Whatever you spend on Shabbos and Yom Tov is not counted. It's not part of your cheshbon of how much you are going to make. She'im meisiv, if a person spends more, meisifin loy, then they're going to get more. And I even saw poskim that say nowadays that even if you turn on your air conditioner for Shabbos, which is an expense to have, to be able to sit in a comfortable place, even if you have your air conditioner on the rest of the week, but what you do for Shabbos is not counted. So there is that idea. Now, what's this idea of borrowing, and why did I take out that part where it says afilu al, and I said you should only borrow if you have what to give as collateral. So basically, if you have what to use as collateral, you own things that you could, barter, I guess you could say. So then the halacha is you can borrow based on that. So you don't have to sell them to be able to do it necessarily, but you can borrow based on that. So you go to someone, you say, look, I'll give you my pen for a week if you can lend me $100, whatever. And then you could do that. But if you don't even have what to use as a mashkin, so then you don't have a chiyuv to spend more than what you have. You don't have to go into debt for Shabbos, as we'll see in the next halacha, in the next part of the halacha. You don't have to go into debt. If you do have it and it's not money, but it's something else, so fine, you could use it as a collateral and then borrow money and pay it back. But if you don't have anything, you don't have not sign out money and sign out resources that you could use as collateral, then you shouldn't borrow. Okay? Now, what happens if you don't have anything? So what do you do then? So the Kitzur continues. Let's say a person is in a very rough spot. They're in debt and they're not having a proper income, etc. So on this, our Chachamim tell us, make your Shabbos into a weekday, meaning don't do anything that's extraordinary for Shabbos. And therefore don't need other people. In other words, better make your Shabbos into a regular day of a weekday as opposed to needing other people. So in other words, if you have an option of going and asking people to give you money, to lend you money, but you don't have anything that you could use as collateral, that means that you're borrowing on a debt then you don't have to do that. When we call makim, however, if possible, maybe you can do even a tiny little thing for Shabbos to show that you have more honor for Shabbos. Going, for example, dagim ktanim, for example, small fish. If you have like what we call, I guess now, what do they call it? Sardines, something along those lines. There's another word in Russian. They call it I forgot what it's called exactly. No, it's like a Yiddish. Anyways, but even small fish. If you want to use small fish, because it's not something so fancy, you kadema, but even that would be a good thing for a person to do something to honor Shabbos. Now, this is the side halacha that if someone sends you something for Shabbos, they want to send you a gift. So then, you should make sure to eat that on Shabbos because it was sent for the honor of Shabbos. You shouldn't leave it over for a weekday. Now, I don't know if you have to eat it mamash that Shabbos, or you could eat it, meaning in those days they didn't have things that could last that long. I mean, wine, but other than that, most things didn't last so long, so maybe they meant then to eat it that Shabbos. But in theory, I think you could keep it for next Shabbos probably too. But over here, they put it from the Alter Rebbe, a very important point, which is mimidas chasidus. That this is only if you want to be lifni mishuras hadid. If you want to do something extra. But mamish, like if it's apila actual halacha, you don't actually have to do this. So let's say, for example, and this happens all the time. Someone comes Friday night to your meal. Hopefully it's before Shabbos, and they bring you a gift. They bring you wine. They bring you Trader Joe's babka or something else. Hopefully it's kosher and you could use it. So in theory, they brought it to you for Shabbos. It's a midas chasidis to use it on Shabbos. But let's say you already have cake, you already have your dessert. By the time it comes there, no one eats it. So fine, you could have it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but according to Alter Rebbe, it will be okay. It's only mimidas chasidis that you should only keep it for Shabbos. Okay? Yeah. Oh, fine. Siftes. Now, this is all okay. Now, moving along. Ein lasos melacha b'derech keva be'erev Shabbos mimincha ktana ulamayla. So now let's talk about Friday's manim for a second. Not too much. We'll get into it maybe a little bit later. We'll give a little shir on like closer to Shabbos. But for now, very simple is like let's keep it simple. Chatzos is let's assume 12 o'clock. Mincha G'dayla is a half hour later. Why is it a half hour later? Because technically from Chatzos you're already allowed to bring the carbon Shalbein Harbaim, the evening carbon, right? Mincha, the carbon mincha, you're allowed to bring in the second half of the day. Now, what's the problem? That in the olden days, they didn't have clocks. So chatzos is when the sun is directly on top of you. But the half hour before and the half hour after, it's very hard to see. Is it mamash on top of me? Is a little bit, a half hour later? So therefore, the Chachamim said, you know what? Give it a half hour. Half hour after chatzos, you already notice that it's already passed. So therefore, what we call mincha g'dayla means it's now the time of the mincha carbon, but it's g'dayla, you have a lot of time. You have all the way till at night. Okay, so it's a bunch of hours. Fine. Then you have what's called mincha ktana. Mincha ktana is when you have very little time to still bring the carbon mincha. So that's already much closer to the evening. That's going to be, 1 second, it's getting close to the set. Now that's going to be 2.5 hours before sunset. There's a whole machlekes if it means exactly what time it means, but we'll keep it simple. You look at your calendar, whatever it says there, that's what you'll do. So you're talking about mincha ktana. Mincha ktana means that it's still the time of mincha, but it's ktana, there's not a lot of time left. That's 2.5 hours before Shkia. Now, 1 second. Now, the last thing we'll say is, let's say, plaga mincha. Plaga mincha means half of mincha. Half of mincha means that in the time of your mincha ktana, your small time, till the end of the day is 2.5 hours. Half of that is what we call mincha ktana, plaga mincha, half of it. What would that be? 1.25 hours before Shkia. So 1.25 hours before Shkia is called plaga mincha. Okay? So, 1 hour and a half, yeah. So therefore, let's say, for example, if you want to talk about davening Ma'ariv early. So the best way to daven Ma'ariv early is if you daven mincha before plaga mincha. If you want to take in Shabbos, you cannot take in Shabbos too early. If you make Kiddush Friday morning, it doesn't do anything. When could you take in Shabbos? From plaga mincha. From 1.25 hours before night, that's when you could make Kiddush and take in Shabbos. And if you did it early, it doesn't help you. If you lit Shabbos candles in the afternoon, doesn't help you. You have to do it after Plaga Mincha. Okay, so now back to what we said. You shouldn't do regular melacha from the time of Mincha Ktana. Yeah, which means 2.5 hours before Shabbos will start, you should stop doing your melacha. And in Shulchan Aruch it says you're not going to see a Siman bracha from from this that you do, from this work that you do. Now, by the way, just to show you how sort of strict it is, even though we don't paskin that way, is that there are those who say that when it says you're not allowed to do malacha, it actually means from mincha gdela. That means a half hour after chatzos on Friday afternoon, you're not allowed to do malacha anymore. Malacha means labor. Doesn't mean working in a store like we'll see soon. It means working like labor, like building things and that type of stuff. But there are some people who say from a half hour after chatzos you already have to stop. That's very early. Now the Alter Rebbe says it's a machlekes, but because he says because over here you could be mekel because it's only a midrabanan. I mean, according to the Torah, you could do everything till Shabbos. So because it's only a midrabanan exeda to protect Shabbos, so you could be mekel, and therefore we will take on this halacha from mincha tam. So again, 2.5 hours before night, you have to stop doing malacha, and that means labor, hard labor, where you're going to schwitz and like that type of thing. Fine. However, there are sometimes you could. For example, if it's something came up, you're in your house, and all of a sudden you notice that your irrigation system broke. So if you have to fix it. It's like leaking. You have a leak under your sink. You have this, you have that. So you're going to do real labor. You're going to screw things in. You're going to undo things. You're going to get on your hands and knees. So you're allowed to do that if it just happened, as long as you're not doing this as a weekly thing. The whole week you're busy. And every Friday you're going to say, everything that's broken in the house, I'm going to fix before Shabbos. You can't do that. But if something breaks and you're in a situation, yeah, you can do that. So derech arai is mutter. If it came up sort of temporarily or something on its own, time to time, then you can do it. Another way you can do this is if it's the tzorech Shabbos. So let's say, for example, you have something, let's say in your kitchen broke and you have to fix it, or let's say you get something, I don't know, you're having a farbrengen outside, you're doing kiddush outside, and a table came and you have to build a table, I don't know, something like that. So the whole reason why you're doing it is for Shabbos. So that's also a case that you could do it. Then gam acher kach mutter would be you'll be able to do it later also, and also if it's for a mitzvah. So let's say you're home, you're a new shliach, and you buy an aron kodesh, cabinet that you're going to use as an aron kodesh for Shabbos. So it's for a mitzvah that you want to build the aron kodesh in order that you should be able to put the Torah inside. So this is something for Shabbos. You can do that. Okay. Now, moving along, what else? Other types of things should you not do? So velasas bigdei chaveri b'schar. Let's say you want to make clothing for someone. So you're a tailor or yourself, whatever. You want to make clothing. Well, here it's just for your friend, actually. So, and you're doing it for a business, the schar, which means that you're getting paid for it. This is something that you're doing as a business. So then the halacha is it's asur. That you can't do. It's the same thing as doing work. You shouldn't save it for Friday afternoon. However, mi shahu ani, if person is poor, right? They don't have resources. They don't have what to buy for Shabbos, as they used to say. There's a Yiddish expression. When you want to refer to someone who's super wealthy, you say Arhatay Shabbos. Means like he has food for Shabbos. That's the expression. But it comes up in halacha, like even for tzedakah or things like that, you have enough food to get you through Shabbos. There's a certain gather. So 1 second. So no, that's something else. That is, but that's something else. Okay. Someone that doesn't have resources, they're poor or whatever it is, and he wants to pasha do business in order to have money, the tzedakah Shabbos, so he could buy his needs, then he could. He's allowed to. Just like in chalamoid. If it comes chalamoid and the guy has no money, or you're going to have it, well, there's other ways that you could work in chalamoid. Not a lot. People probably extend it too far, but assuming that a person will work because they need the money, right? That's the way, someone says, well, I mean, I maybe, I have money for a couple of days, but I need to pay rent and I don't have money for rent or whatever it is. So then you'd be able to do the work in Chalamayit. So the same thing would apply here for Friday afternoon. If a person doesn't have resources to be able to buy what they need, they could work on Friday in order to get it. Let's finish the sif, yeah? The Saperes Yisrael. What happens if someone wants to get a haircut? So if a Yid wants to give another Yid a haircut, mutter kolayim, you're allowed to do that the whole day. Afilu ma'isa uman, even if they're a professional, so it's a good job. Not like, the Bachim here do a fantastic job, but the guys that give the professionals, afilu b'schar, you're even allowed to get paid for it. Why should you be able to do this? The reason is because when a person gets a haircut, everyone knows, why did you get a haircut? Because it's out of Shabbos. In fact, that's the halacha. You should get a haircut out of Shabbos, as we'll talk about later. Cut your nails. We'll talk about all these things. Grooming. To groom yourself to look like a mensch, you do out of Shabbos. So it's a mitzvah. Everyone knows, why is the guy getting a haircut on Friday afternoon? Because he was rushed the whole week? Maybe. But the real reason is because it's Shabbos. He wants to look like a mensch. Erev Yom Tov, people are getting haircuts. Why? Because Erev Yom Tov. So it's right. It's clear why a person's doing it. So therefore we allow this as well. Now, the last point over here that we say is you should close your stores an hour before Shabbos. That means like this. Let's divide what we said. We spoke about real work. Real work means like getting your hands dirty. So there are certain cases where you could do that on Friday, but in a lot of cases, you should really stop from Mincha Ktana and on. Now, if you need it, if you're poor, the things that we mentioned. However, if a person owns a store, which means that you're not doing work or labor, you're just sitting in a store doing business. Business is not work, it's not labor. It's like a nuance, meaning in English, the words are interchangeable. But in halacha, they're different words. Sitting in a store is not called melacha, it's called pragmatio, which means business. So in that case, you can do that up to 1 hour before Shabbos. 1 hour before Shabbos, as you learn in the Rambam, the way they used to blow the shofars, and we'll get here later in the Gemara and Sukkah as well, but how they would blow the shofar. So if that's the case, then you're allowed to do that on all the way up to an hour before. 1 second, you have a question? Study what? We'll talk about it later, but generally not. Yeah. It doesn't say so till sounds like till end of Shabbos. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I believe they're not supposed to start from Mincha Ktana, because then you might get caught in the.
Okay. You're talking about on Friday, or you're talking about every day?